What is up, everybody? Mr. Purtis here. Welcome to the final Cram session of the time periods for AP World. This is on units 7, 8, and 9. 7, 8, and 9 are all from the same time period, so they're all kind of going on at the same time, although they try and break it up a little bit. But we're really looking at 1900 through 2001. So just an FYI, anything kind of considered like the post 9/11, like September 11, 2001, is not part of the AP World exam. It's everything before there. This is 5 things you need to know. This is like a quick 10, 12-minute review thing. If you haven't watched any of the other ones, this is not all inclusive. I'm just trying to give you a couple things to refresh your memory, just to kind of go through 5 things that you should know, but there's more than 5 things, obviously. So let's rock and roll here. Here's the first thing, is the world wars. We have World War I and World War II. Teachers who teach history love World War I and World War II, and oftentimes we get bogged down in World War I and World War II. For the AP exam, it's just one piece of what's going on, and you won't see anything on like battles or military strategy for the most part. Really what it's about, there's kind of a couple keys to the world wars that you need to know, whether it's World War I and World War II. One is the colonial peoples. The people who were imperialized from imperialism in the previous time period of 1750 to 1900 are going to help fight for their mother country in World War I and then again in World War II. They are promised their independence. After World War I, they don't get this independence, and it leads to this rise in nationalism where people want their freedom and independence. We see the same thing after World War II, and for the most part, most colonies get their independence after World War II, but we'll come back to that in a second. The second thing is total war. This is the idea that everyone in a society, not just the soldiers and the military officials and the government officials, are involved in the war. It's everybody. It is the children, it is the grandparents, it's the stay-at-home moms, it's the men who aren't serving in the military. It's everybody. We're going to have women working in factories as men go off and fight. We're going to see the rationing of food, meaning that you only get so much food, so much gas, so much whatever. And people are supposed to eat less food. By consuming less food, that leaves more food that can be sent overseas. So this is total, complete war. Also, we see with total war we see civilians involved. And we specifically are going to see civilians involved in fighting in World War II when civilians are specifically targeted, but more on that with the mass atrocities in a second. And also we have new technologies. Both World War I and World War II, we're going to see new inventions that are going to lead to the death of people. For example, in World War I, we see trench warfare, machine guns, grenade launchers, flamethrowers, tanks. And in World War II, we see improvement of tanks, of course, the atomic bomb, planes that are firebomb and drop bombs on cities. A lot of new technological advances come as a result of war and trying to win war. Also, you should know the causes of World War I, which are main militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism, and of course the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. His name was Franz Ferdinand, fun fact. And causes of World War II, which is the issues, then the unresolved issues after World War I, specifically the Treaty of Versailles. We have aggression on the behalf of Japan, Italy, and Germany, who are going out and conquering places, and the League of Nations, which is weak, not doing anything. And then we have the appeasement, letting these countries do it. Appeasement is a term that means to give something up in order to avoid war. So these European countries are going to allow Hitler, for example, to take over little areas in order to avoid war. And the second piece is, the last final piece is that we have in between the wars, between World War I and World War II, we're going to have this totalitarianism, which is we're going to see the rise of these totalitarian leaders, Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and then after World War II, we see Mao. We have these fascist leaders, Hitler and Mussolini, and then communist leaders, Stalin and Mao. But all of them are totalitarian, total control over all aspects of citizens' lives, controlling everything. So that's a lot in the world wars. The second thing is, we see mass atrocities in the 20th century. For the most part, we're talking about how this is, we're talking about Holocaust, we're talking about genocides, we're talking about inhumane or mass atrocities, or a mass atrocity, something that's so horrible beyond comprehension. And we see a bunch of things here. You can kind of check out some of these on the maps. My class, we focus obviously on the Holocaust. We focus also on the rape of Nanjing, which happens before World War II, when the Japanese invade China and kill indiscriminately in the capital of China, Nanjing, also raping women, some horrendously awful. We also talked about the genocide in Turkey, or what was the Ottoman Empire during World War I, killing the Christian Armenians. There's other genocides around the world. We have genocide in Cambodia, which was in the 1970s and 80s. We have the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, in Darfur, which is the late 90s, early 2000s, and then Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was 1993, 94, or the early 90s, sorry. And we also have the Stalin's famine in the Ukraine, which we talked about as well, where he starves the Ukrainian people to feed the workers and to punish them for demanding their independence. So lots of mass atrocities in the 20th century, more so than we see in others, generally targeting a specific ethnic group who are being blamed for some type of problems, which is known as a scapegoat. Also, we have number 3, Cold War and proxy wars. Huge topic. It's kind of its own half of Unit 8. Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union following World War II. They're going to compete over who can get the most countries, who can build up the most nuclear weapons, who can get to outer space first. And I mentioned the idea, this is similar to like free agents in sports. You're trying to get as many countries on your side and you offer them something to join them. And if they don't join you, unlike free agency, you might send in soldiers, in this case, to help the democratic opponents or help the communist opponents who are fighting against this. This map here is showing you the dark blue are the NATO countries. These are strong, democratic, aligned countries, and NATO was a military alliance. The response to that by the communist countries is called the Warsaw Pact. This is an alliance between the communist countries where they say if any democratic country invades us, we have your back. So these are like the strong alliances, the dark blue and the dark red. Other countries are allies of the United States, and you're going to see those in the light blue here. So primarily in Latin America, we see light blue. Down here in Southeast Asia and Australia, Japan, South Korea, and then we see a little bit sprinkled throughout the Middle East and Africa. There are some countries who are not going to be part of this Cold War. They are called non-aligned countries, and they were generally countries that gained their independence and kind of say, we don't want to be part of any of this nonsense between European countries. There are some areas where we see what are called proxy wars. These are when wars are going to be fought when a communist government takes over and, for example, the United States is worried communism is going to spread, so they send in soldiers to help fight against the communist government and support the democratic government. We see the opposite, where the Soviet Union gets scared that a democracy is popping up and they want to send in soldiers to help promote communism. Where the main proxy wars happened, just as a little refresher for you, we have a proxy war in Korea, we have a proxy war here in Vietnam, we have a proxy war in Angola, we have a proxy war we have a couple of proxy wars in Central America. We have little things popping up in South America, and really all throughout the world. We have proxy wars and kind of supporting of governments happening throughout. This is a lot of tension going on. There's a lot of people who lose their lives over these two different ideologies. Communism in the Cold War ends in 1991 when the Soviet Union falls due to poor economic conditions, due to lack of freedoms, more globalization, and interconnectedness leads to the people in the Soviet Union questioning what's going on and whether or not they should have more freedoms. And also we have this war here in Afghanistan that the Soviet Union fought from the late 70s through the late 80s, which kind of left them in economic trouble because it was an impossible war for them to win. Number 4, don't forget this one, an important one. We have decolonization, also known as nationalism, also known as the end of imperialism. We're going to have places around the world that have been imperialized since either the late 1700s, 1800s, all the way through the mid-1900s, who after World War II, they were promised their independence, many of them. And after World War II, a lot of these European countries are kind of broke. Also, there's this increase in nationalism amongst the colonies, so independence starts happening. Some countries get their independence peacefully. For example, India is one country that gets it peacefully. Some countries have to rise up and fight. A lot of the Sub-Saharan, especially the Southern African countries are going to have to rise up and fight for their independence against Europeans as they are reluctant to give them to them. So you can see around the map here, if you just check out this map, you can see that it's really a wave of independence, and it just shows kind of the interconnectedness of the time. Most of this is happening between 47, you can see 48, and then here in Africa we see 58 through 60 up here in the west coast of Africa, and then down here we have this late 50s into the 60s. So it's really kind of spreading throughout. And if you just take a look at this map, the green is the French, we have the British, the Belgians, obviously the Dutch, Southeast Asia. Don't forget, I love the Strait of Malacca right here. I don't know why, it's going to come up at some point on an AP exam. But all this is happening. New countries are going to be formed as a result of this. One example is India and Pakistan that used to be part of just the British Raj. Then they gained their independence and they split between India, which is primarily Hindu, and Pakistan, which is primarily Muslim, and then those two countries don't like each other, which is nationalism. We also have ethnic conflict as a result of colonial borders. So this map of Africa was created by Europeans without caring who we're putting into one country together. It was fine when the Europeans ruled over it with an iron fist, but when you give them independence, or when they achieve their independence, whether through armed struggle or voluntarily given by Europeans, now we have a multi-ethnic country in which people don't necessarily like each other. So it's going to lead to ethnic conflict and tension. We see that in many countries in West Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa today. And then last but not least, we have these demographic changes. Second half of the 20th century, we see a huge population increase. We have the Green Revolution, which the AP world loves the Green Revolution. I always see something on the Green Revolution. Green Revolution is new fertilizers, crop rotations, and crop techniques, genetically modified organisms, for example, that is going to lead to an increase in food, which leads to an increase in population. Most of this population increase is going to happen in developing countries, also formerly known as kind of second or third world. That's kind of an old school term, but these developing countries that are not fully industrialized. So now you have better crop yields, which leads to more food. More food leads to happy people. Happy people have lots of babies, and we have an increase in population because the babies aren't dying because they're being fed. Also, we have new medical advances. We have vaccines and antibiotics, stuff that people were dying from in the first half of the 20th century. People aren't dying from them anymore. So we see people living longer. A longer life expectancy also means an aging population that people need to take care of, especially in the industrialized world. So you're going to see the rise of nursing homes and Medicare and insurance programs and how are we going to take care of 95-year-old grandma, that kind of stuff, when before those people weren't living past their mid-60s. This is just a quick chart here. It took all the way until 1900 to get to 1 billion people, and from 1900 until I think it was in 2010, we hit 7 billion, and we should be approaching 8 billion people by 2030. I believe 2030. So it took all of human history till 1900 to get to 1 billion, and from 1900 to 2010 we went from 1 billion to 7 billion. So there's pressure from that. Also, we have this globalization. We have increased communication, increased interaction because of technological advances. We have transnational businesses. Example is Coca-Cola, McDonald's. We have global feminism, where we have people fighting for women's rights around the world. It's different in industrialized countries than it might be in unindustrialized countries. We have the United Nations. We have nonprofit organizations like the Fair Trade Organization. If you need to know more about these, go back and check out some of the old videos. That's a lot. This is a huge unit. Don't get too bogged down in this unit because it's just as important as the other ones, but that's 1900 to 2001. Boom, 5 things you need to know. Cram session done, Mr. Purtis.